My goal in this video, it's going to be very difficult for me because my hearing aids aren't operating very well. But my goal in this video is to practice some things that are difficult to communicate to other people and to identify where I stand by what little I know about the social movement that's ongoing in the United States. It's causing a good deal of consternation in the press and various police departments because of some um, gunplay and the way that the sympathies are identified in the matter. Um, However, back to my own experiences. So I want to make clear what I do know and what I don't know about what is or could be going on. Now, I'm an object of hate crime, and this is often disputed. So let me begin by addressing the information war. The information war is something we hear described as attempts to um, generate opinion through the news, through selective readings of events by what's put first, what's not mentioned at all. And it seems to me that there's an element of information war in what's going on with respect to how I am designated and have been treated. And to see the point, um, you have to realize that I was a child of a humanist professor, so I was categorically identified as part of the liberal conspiracy to be shunned. And during the 60s, what came along was a movement of sexual libertinage that ran afoul of the medieval idea that um, sex was never um, without um, consequences. And people who said like the birth control pill could overcome scientifically these consequences and make safe sex possible were told they were being fooled, that they were committing the worst crime of all, which was abortion. So what happened was that this was called a philosophy of getting laid. And what they did between horrifying torments like giving me a nerve agent was line up what Greg Carl documented as successive degradations of the X motive, which meant opportunities to get laid. And what they did was make me what Jane Thompson used to call a martyr complex. They conditioned me into a pitch as an object fixated, the martyr complex. Now, when I fell in love with Rosine, they particularly became corrections minded and flocked down on me as a cult to isolate me because they were supposedly indignant that this resulted in her rejecting me and throwing an unborn child in my face. Whether it was actually from her or not, it's never been clear, but it was obviously mine. They put it up on the walls at school and so forth, this movement. Well, I should point out that they're the ones that did that, not me. And their argument is that I gave them the opportunity to do that. Does that make it any the less they're doing? They can't conceptualize that. And one of the reasons is because they have this thing going where they imagine that there's a great replacement going on. I don't really know what that means, but I'm going to run with the ball, what it implies. that public schools are replacing slavery for citizens of color. That's a no-no. That they want a humanist in a martyr complex to replace our understanding of Jesus. And of course, they're the ones making all this stuff up. It has nothing to do. They're the ones who refuse to allow sex education in schools, which would have made people mature about it instead of leering and sniveling. So, what did this crowd do with Gail Burson, who I've been investigating? Well, one of the things that she used to say was the bad girls were were really bad, but the goody goodies were twice as bad. So, in other words, they were conceiving resentment for public schools and safety and sex education because it ran afoul of fight clubs and brutal violence over sexual conquest and human trafficking. And this is what we see as a puritanical parochialism on high. And of course, they clocked that business about a race revenge over Maduri Goto to the AIDS attack, the two virgins ordeal that John Lennon and Yoko Ono came up with. But when you look at the language that was used in Gary Hart, Donna Rice, when they killed Kennedy, the Warren Commission talks about not enough food to feed a sparrow, and the Oswald edition of Life magazine has a cowboy pouring out a few Rice Krispies, and it says, "The East shall never meet the West except over a bowl of Rice Krispies." And he said, "Where's the beef?" You see, this is about if we keep allowing them Asians to breed like rabbits, we'll all be eating rice and there won't be enough beef to go around. That's the subtext of the language, military language, that was used, evoked to justify the murder of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, President of the United States, while they were kidnapping me and torturing me, giving me what they call a behavioral. So, where does this lead in their philosophical undertaking is, something that you could talk about academically. One of the Lopers in that crowd, that Lavrov crowd, or whoever those people are at Pitt, from Harvard, gave me Narcissus and Goldman to read. Or Damien, I guess. I went on to read Narcissus and Goldman. Damien had that horrible memory of that man who kidnapped me. In the epigram, kill someone who won't let you forget. Because the victim's going to come back. Oh, what's he going to do? And that dude said he's in no position to move against me. And so, what I was really trying to do was move away from them, and that's an old story. But Narcissus and Goldman, the monk, never seems to age, but he never seems to live either. Whereas Goldman ages rapidly and dies young, but is full of experience. And that's a sort of, parable that um, the story of this alternative view about what people should be doing. Their interpretation of the Great Replacement is that, there's always been cliques who are exceptional, who are exclusional, the exceptionalism of the Russians, the Nordic exceptionals, the the brotherhood of secret parochials, the mystics of the Templar, and so on. And we're trying to replace that with healthcare and public education, ecology. Well, they're going to pump fossil fuel into the atmosphere, and we'll have a survivalist showdown with these great replacers, is the way they imagine. But let's move on a little bit from this into the research I've done. And as I've said, one of the things I believe is that there's this super story going on, a conversation going on back and forth in the films made by Axis Cinema in Hollywood, Japan, and their allies all over the world. They have a super story that they never name. One of the aspects of that super story is the two virgins quid pro quo in the ethnic arrangement, the eugenic barter system of trafficking fight clubs. But also, you have the fact that AIDS was genocide pornography. And one of the images I have here is from Suki Bondika. It says, hide something dirty somewhere dirty. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about when I say that I have found evidence of a superscript. Now, what we've recently learned about this superscript is it comes from the Ouspensky Society. They believe in the fourth way, the fourth dimension. They think these are mystical alloys of the subconscious realm of the noumena. And so that's why they never come right out and spell it. They want the viewer to conjure understanding subliminally in their relationship to the fourth way, the fourth dimension that was developed. If you think about the thesis, I showed how the defeated in the Civil War reasserted their power. And then after World War II, they did again. And it was the same crowd. D.W. Griffith was working with Reagan. And he made the Burning Cross for the KKK and Birth of a Nation at the turn of the century. And the same wheel encompasses Ouspensky, who was a friend of Prokofiev and Picasso when they were working together, and then went on to influence the Coward Fripp and Bowie's Penis Gabriel scene, Her Majesty's Cranks. So you have this, coalescing of the authors of the Superstory. The only research, potentially productive research field would be D.W. Griffith, Royal Welsh. And did they know P.D. Ouspensky or have any contacts with the people Ouspensky knew? It looks like they did from the research evidence. I'll show you some of it. The script that they planted on me is from the Neva Mancine crowd. Neva is a pornographic system that uses a C and a Star of David. And see, in the Axis cinema realm, a Star of David is the victims of a genocide, and they're putting it on pornography, right? Hiding something dirty somewhere dirty. These are different companies, different films, but a conversation is going back and forth between them. It would be possible for me to rest my case at that point. It really would be. But there's no point in my resting the case because I have hundreds and hundreds of examples. I could share with you over and over again the evidence that this is what really happened. It's the realm of cinema working on a super story of victory and revenge planning by the Axis. And what they did and how they operated was through the use of double entendres as well as double agencies. And I have all of the evidence here. It's a great deal that I could show you. But as if you may remember that when I first began this discussion, I said that I wanted to work on um, the procedural aspect of showing this kind of evidence because it's very hard to know if a person grasps or follows what's happened. I've never really secured any peer interest in these matters, but here's the image I mentioned to you from the Rice Krispies, from the Oswald Diary of Life. East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet, except maybe over a bowl of Rice Krispies. You notice how there's barely enough rice to feed a sparrow in the box of Rice Krispies. So you may wonder, is that a crank observation? So I moved um, relatively gracefully to the point of the other side of overpopulation is if we stop feeding people, what do we do with them? And hide something dirty somewhere dirty, right? You sabotage them and blow them up through sex, you know, and that's the goody goodies being twice as bad, you might say. Well, so perhaps you'll pardon me. As I go through these, I could pick at random and show you items of interest. But what I'm looking to do is find items that gracefully follow one after another in this exercise. In other words, I don't want to just show you things that fit. I want to show you things that are inextricably bound to one another. In the way the image from Suki Bandika is inextricably bound to the image from Neva Corporation, and the way the extermination system is inextricably bound to the hunger. So rather than try to take the tack of coordinating things that are um, not finessed to one another yet in my files, all of which are very, very interesting and can be made to be comprehensible relative to one another. I prefer to, I would prefer to stop, but it's at the moment it's not necessary for me to stop because I found a good example of the sort of thing that I'm looking for. Notice some things about these three images from three different studios. For one, the women all have their hands clapped over their ears. This is relevant. It's relevant to the fact that I'm deaf. So you're actually looking at four images here. Me, the image of the sniper with the girls with their hands over their ears. The Neva Corporation symbol of the rerouted motorcade with the woman with her hands over her ears. And the look-alike of the script writer who wrote the scroll that was sent to me, Gail Burson, with the caption, "It would be just like starting over." See, these are warlords who want revenge or have taken revenge for Hiroshima, and their guardian angel throughout this whole thing has been, if you don't want to jump the gun and get right to John Lennon, we can at least agree that it was Trumpy tune. But I also believe it was John Lennon. I think that there's plenty of evidence that Lennon was in on it and faked his assassination. Plenty of evidence for that. He used the double fantasy as the code for his project. And as you notice, look-alike of Gail Burson, it says it will be just like starting over, which was the name of the song that announced hostilities. So what I have is a ton of materials, all of which are relevant and show both the style of the investigation that I've been conducting, what I've found, and what I'm looking for. This is directly from the script of Gail Burson. Only two people would know, she says. only two people would know, and you would be one of them. Turns out a lot of people knew, and I wasn't one of them. There's so much in this material to be um, to be correlated and finalized as a presentation project, and yet it hasn't yet been. And it's hard work to know what to prioritize and how to go about it. Like I just caught a glimpse of something I think it would be good to show you as I went through, as I'm going through hundreds of images from many different films. This again is another film with a lookalike of Gail Burstyn. It's about Unit 731. And as you can see, she's gassed in that film. So you have this situation, the girl who, lookalike of the girl who wrote these letters, who's gassed in the context of this conversation going back and forth between companies like this one, who ran a sex trafficking war game called Two Virgins. I think I've done what I've set out to do, which was to show there's a basis for understanding the way that Gail Burstyn set the stage for what Russia is pulling with Trump in the Ukraine. You see, what we're talking about is a super story, a conversation going on in the background of many, many films starring people like Ingrid Bergman and Gregory Peck. Movies that have a semiotic. And if you use captions so that you can see the text, you can freeze the image and you'll get a ha. So that's what they're saying when you see the images and the text on the screen at the same time with some of the background features. It's not a prominent aspect of the movie itself. That's why it goes in subconsciously. And it's being arranged by fourth way psychologists. It's a conversation with the subconscious from the fourth dimension, mongered by the squalid parochial. Don't take them seriously. They don't believe in God. They're juveniles.